Mia-chan stared at the ring pop in the small boy's outstretched hand, her heart doing something strange in her chest. The afternoon sun filtered through the windows of her tiny Brooklyn art studio, casting golden streaks across the paint-splattered floor. She had been in the middle of touching up a commissioned portrait when the doorbell chimed, and now here she stood, completely unprepared for what was happening. The boy couldn't have been more than 6 years old. He wore a miniature navy suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, his dark hair perfectly combed to one side. His eyes, bright and impossibly earnest, looked up at her with the kind of determination usually reserved for CEOs closing billion-dollar deals. "Miss Mia," he said again, his voice carrying that adorable lisp that made her name sound like Myth Mia. "Will you marry me?" Before we continue with this heartwarming story, if you love unexpected romance and emotional twists, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our next incredible tale. We are so close to reaching 10,000 subscribers, and your support means everything to us. Now let's dive back into Mia's unforgettable encounter. Mia blinked, trying to process the surreal moment. This was the third time this week the boy had shown up at her studio. The first time, he had simply stood outside the window, pressing his nose against the glass and watching her paint. The second time, he had brought her a dandelion he had picked from somewhere, presenting it with the solemnity of a knight offering a token to his lady. But this was an entirely different level of unexpected. "Sweetie," Mia crouched down to meet him at eye level, her paint-stained apron bunching awkwardly around her knees. "I'm really flattered, but I don't even know your name. And where are your parents? Does someone know you're here?" The boy's expression shifted, his lower lip trembling slightly. For a horrible moment, Mia thought he might cry, and she felt her resolve crumbling. She had always been terrible with tears, especially from children. "My name is Oliver," he announced, straightening his tiny shoulders. "Oliver Ashford, and I know you're the one because you smell like strawberries and paint, and you always smile at me when I walk past, even when other grown-ups don't notice me at all." Mia's heart squeezed. She remembered those moments now. The little boy in expensive clothes trailing behind a harried-looking nanny, always stopping to stare at her art displayed in the window. She had smiled at him because he looked so serious, so much older than his years, and she had wanted to see if she could crack that somber expression. "Oliver, that's very sweet, but marriage is for grown-ups," Mia said gently, taking the ring pop from his small hand. "How about we share this instead? Where's your nanny, the lady who's usually with you?" Oliver's face fell. "Mrs. Patterson quit this morning. She was the fourth one this month. They all quit because Daddy works too much and I ask too many questions." He said it matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather, but Mia heard the loneliness underneath. Before she could respond, the studio door burst open with enough force to make the bell clatter violently. A man strode in, and Mia's first thought was that he looked like he had stepped out of a magazine spread titled "Billionaires Who Forgot How to Smile." Tall, with the same dark hair as Oliver, but cut shorter and styled with expensive precision, he wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car. His jaw was clenched so tight she worried his teeth might crack. "Oliver James Ashford," the man said, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "What have I told you about wandering off?" Oliver's entire body seemed to shrink, and Mia felt something fierce and protective flare in her chest. She stood up, placing herself slightly between the boy and his father. "He wasn't wandering," Mia said coolly. "He was visiting a friend." The man's eyes, the same striking blue as Oliver's, snapped to her face. For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Something that looked almost like surprise, but it was gone so quickly Mia thought she might have imagined it. "And you are?" he asked, his tone suggesting he was used to people falling over themselves to answer his questions. "Mia Chen, I own this studio." She crossed her arms, very aware of the paint on her hands and the hole in the knee of her jeans. "And you're apparently Oliver's father, who works too much and scares away nannies." Oliver gasped softly, and even the intimidating man in front of her seemed taken aback. His jaw worked, and for a second, Mia thought he might actually yell at her. Instead, he closed his eyes briefly and took a deep breath. "Alexander Ashford," he said finally, extending a hand, "and I apologize for my son disturbing your work." Mia shook his hand, noting how warm and firm his grip was, and how it lingered just a fraction longer than necessary. He wasn't disturbing me. He was actually quite charming. She glanced down at Oliver, who was watching the exchange with wide eyes. He proposed to me, actually. Alexander's expression shifted through several emotions too quickly to name, landing somewhere between mortified and exhausted. Oliver, we've talked about this. But Daddy, she's perfect, Oliver protested, his small voice gaining confidence. She smiles real smiles, not fake ones like the ladies you go to dinner with. And she paints beautiful things. And she talks to me like I'm a real person, not just some kid. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Mia watched Alexander's face carefully and saw the moment something cracked in his armor. His shoulders dropped slightly. And when he looked at his son, there was such raw pain in his eyes that Mia had to look away. Oliver, Alexander said quietly, kneeling down beside his son, you can't just propose to people. And Miss Chen has her own life. She doesn't want to be bothered by us. Actually, Mia heard herself say, surprising even herself, I was just about to take a break. Oliver, would you like to see the painting I'm working on? It's a garden full of butterflies. Oliver's face lit up like Times Square at midnight, and even Alexander looked startled. You don't have to, he started, but Mia waved him off. I want to. Come on. She led them deeper into the studio, past canvases in various stages of completion, past her collection of vintage brushes and jars of colored water. The butterfly painting sat on an easel near the back window, and Oliver approached it with reverence, his small hands clasped behind his back as if he were at a museum. It's so pretty, he breathed. Are butterflies real or pretend? Mia blinked, glancing at Alexander, who had the grace to look embarrassed. They're real, sweetheart. Haven't you seen one before? Oliver shook his head. We live in the tall building with all the windows. Daddy says we're too busy for parks. Oh, Mia said softly, something in her chest aching. She looked at Alexander, who was staring at his son with an expression she couldn't quite read. Well, there's a community garden 3 blocks from here. It's full of butterflies in the summer. Can we go? Oliver asked his father, hope blazing in his eyes. Alexander checked his watch, a gesture so automatic Mia suspected he did it without thinking. Then he caught himself, and something shifted in his face. I have a meeting in 45 minutes. Of course you do, Mia muttered, not quite under her breath. Alexander's eyes snapped to hers, and this time there was heat in them, something that made her pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with anger. You don't know anything about my life or my responsibilities. I know your son thinks butterflies might be pretend, Mia shot back. I know he's proposing to strangers because he's starving for attention. And I know you're so wrapped up in whatever world-changing business you're conducting that you can't see what's right in front of you. The silence that followed was deafening. Oliver looked between them with wide eyes, and Mia immediately regretted her outburst. It wasn't her place. She didn't know these people. She should apologize and let them leave and go back to her quiet, predictable life. But before she could speak, Alexander laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, almost bitter, but it was genuine. You're right, he said simply. You're absolutely right. And I hate that a complete stranger can see in 5 minutes what I've been blind to for months. Mia opened her mouth, closed it again. This was not the reaction she had expected. Daddy? Oliver's voice was small, uncertain. Alexander crouched down again, and this time he pulled his son into a hug that looked like it might break them both. I'm sorry, buddy. I've been a terrible father, haven't I? No, Oliver said quickly, fiercely, wrapping his small arms around his father's neck. You're the best daddy. You just forget sometimes that I'm here. Mia turned away, giving them privacy, blinking hard against the sudden burning in her eyes. She busied herself cleaning brushes she had already cleaned, rearranging tubes of paint that didn't need rearranging. Miss Chen, Alexander's voice was closer than she expected. She turned to find him standing right behind her, Oliver's hand clasped in his. I know this is incredibly presumptuous, but would you consider joining us for dinner? I owe you an apology, and Oliver clearly adores you. I promise we'll stay out of your hair after tonight. Mia studied him carefully. His expression was open in a way it hadn't been before, vulnerable even. And Oliver was looking at her with such hope that she found herself nodding before she could think better of it. Okay, but somewhere casual, and I need 20 minutes to clean up. Deal, Alexander said. And when he smiled, really smiled, Mia understood why people probably fell all over themselves to please him. It transformed his entire face, made him look younger, more human, devastatingly handsome. 20 minutes later, Mia locked up her studio, wearing her least paint-stained jeans and a clean sweater, her long dark hair pulled into a messy bun. Alexander and Oliver waited on the sidewalk, and the evening light caught them just right, father and son, looking at her like she was something precious. They ended up at a small Italian place in the neighborhood, the kind with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles. Oliver chattered nonstop about everything and nothing, his earlier sadness forgotten in the joy of having both his father's and Mia's attention. Alexander listened with an intensity that suggested he was memorizing every word, and Mia found herself relaxing, laughing at Oliver's stories about his adventures at school. "So what do you do?" Mia asked Alexander between courses. "Besides work too much?" Alexander had the grace to look sheepish. "I run a tech company. We develop artificial intelligence systems for various industries. It's boring." "It's not boring," Oliver piped up, mouthful of pasta. "Daddy makes robots think." "Close enough," Alexander said with a smile. "And what about you? How long have you had the studio?" 3 years, Mia said. "I worked in graphic design for a while, hated the corporate world, and decided to take a leap. It's terrifying and wonderful, and I'm barely making rent most months, but I get to paint every day. I get to create things that make people happy." "Like butterflies," Oliver said seriously. "Like butterflies," Mia agreed. Alexander was watching her with an expression that made heat creep up her neck. "That's brave," he said quietly, "choosing passion over security." "Or stupid," Mia said with a shrug. "Depends on the day and how many bills are due." The evening passed in a blur of easy conversation and surprising laughter. Oliver eventually fell asleep against Mia's shoulder, his small body warm and trusting, and Alexander carefully lifted him without waking him. "Thank you," he said to Mia as they stood outside the restaurant. "Tonight was the first time in months I felt like I might actually be capable of this whole parenting thing." "You're capable," Mia said softly. "You just need to show up." Alexander nodded, and there was something in his eyes that made Mia's breath catch. "Can I see you again?" "Not for Oliver, for me." Mia hesitated. This was crazy. She didn't date men in suits who ran companies and lived in buildings with all the windows. She dated struggling musicians and fellow artists, people who understood the chaos of creative life. But when she opened her mouth, she heard herself say, yes. The next 3 months unfolded like a dream Mia kept expecting to wake up from. Alexander showed up at her studio the next day with coffee and an apology for being forward. Then he showed up the day after that and the day after that until it became routine. He would stop by during his lunch break or after work, sometimes with Oliver and sometimes alone. They would talk about everything and nothing. He told her about the pressure of running a company he had built from scratch, about the loneliness of success, about his late wife, who had died in a car accident when Oliver was just a baby. Mia told him about her childhood in Queens, about her parents' disappointment when she chose art over law school, about the years she had spent doubting herself and her talent. With Alexander, she felt seen in a way she never had before. He looked at her like she was the most fascinating person in the world, and slowly, terrifyingly, she started believing it. Oliver became a fixture in her life too. She taught him to paint, watched his serious little face light up when he mixed colors for the first time. Alexander loosened his grip on work, started saying no to meetings, started actually living instead of just surviving. The three of them fell into a rhythm that felt natural, right? Like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. But underneath the happiness, Mia felt the constant hum of anxiety. This wasn't real life. Real life was her cramped apartment and ramen dinners and the constant stress of making rent. This was a fairy tale, and fairy tales didn't happen to girls like her. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday evening. Mia was at Alexander's penthouse apartment for the first time, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Oliver was in bed, and she and Alexander were curled up on his obscenely comfortable couch, her feet in his lap. "I need to tell you something," Alexander said, his hand stilling on her ankle. Mia's stomach dropped. This was it. The moment he told her this had been fun, but he was getting back together with some socialite ex-girlfriend, or he was moving to London, or he had realized she didn't fit into his world. "Okay," she said carefully. "My company is going public in 2 months," Alexander said. "It's going to be huge. Media attention, scrutiny, the whole nightmare. And anyone I'm dating will be dragged into it. I need to know if you're prepared for that." Mia stared at him. "Going public? Like stock market public?" "Yes." Alexander's expression was serious. "It's going to change things. There will be photographers, reporters digging into your past, people analyzing every move we make. It's invasive and horrible, and I need to know if you can handle it." "I don't know," Mia said honestly. "I've never thought about it. I'm just a painter. Why would anyone care about me?" Alexander's laugh was humorless. "Because you're with me. Because in about 8 weeks, I'm going to be one of the wealthiest men in the country, and vultures will want to know everything about the woman I'm spending my time with." The words hung between them, heavy and complicated. Mia pulled her feet away, tucking them under herself. "You make it sound like a prison sentence." "Sometimes it feels like one," Alexander admitted. He reached for her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "But with you, for the first time in years, I feel free. I feel like myself again. I just need to know if you're willing to weather the storm with me." Mia looked at their joined hands, at this man who had somehow become essential to her happiness in such a short time. She thought about Oliver's laugh, about the way Alexander kissed her forehead when he thought she was asleep, about the life they were building together. "I'm in," she said finally. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." Alexander pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, and Mia felt his shoulders shake with relief. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for taking a chance on us." The announcement came 6 weeks later, and it was even worse than Alexander had warned. The media went into a frenzy. Alexander Ashford, tech wunderkind, brilliant CEO, 34 years old and single father, was taking his company public in a deal valued at $20 billion. Overnight, he became one of the most talked about men in America, and Mia became collateral damage. The first article appeared in a gossip blog. "Who is mystery woman captured leaving Ashford's building?" accompanied by a grainy photo of Mia in sweats carrying takeout. Then came the deep dives. Her social media was analyzed, her old posts screenshotted and dissected. Someone found her college art show and wrote a scathing review. Her parents were contacted by reporters, her old boyfriends interviewed, her financial struggles laid bare for public consumption. Brooklyn artist Gold Digger read one particularly cruel headline. From food stamps to Forbes, the suspicious rise of Mia Chen. Mia stopped leaving her apartment. The studio became a fortress, curtains drawn, phone silenced. Alexander hired security, which only made things worse, made her feel like an animal in a zoo. Oliver stopped visiting because photographers camped outside the building, and Mia missed him with an ache that felt physical. "I can't do this," she told Alexander 3 weeks into the media circus. They were in his apartment, Oliver asleep down the hall, and Mia felt like she was drowning. "Every day there's something new. Someone found my college transcript, and now everyone knows I dropped out for a semester because I couldn't afford tuition. My parents are being harassed. I had to close my studio because people were showing up and taking pictures through the windows." Alexander looked haggard, older than his years, and Mia knew he was fighting his own battles. The IPO was consuming him, board meetings and investor calls and legal documents that never ended. She was supposed to be his refuge, but instead she had become another problem he had to manage. "I'm sorry," he said, pulling her close. "God, Mia, I'm so sorry. I thought I could protect you from this." "It's not your fault," Mia said against his chest, breathing in his familiar scent. "But I don't know how much more I can take. I feel like I'm losing myself." "Then maybe we need to fight back," Alexander said suddenly, pulling back to look at her. "Stop hiding. Stop letting them control the narrative. Let's tell our story, our way." Mia stared at him. "You want to go public? Deliberately?" I want to stop living in fear, Alexander said firmly. I want to take Oliver to the park without worrying about who's watching. I want to kiss you in public without calculating the fallout. I want to live, Mia, with you. And so they did. Alexander arranged an interview with a respected journalist, someone known for thoughtful profiles rather than sensational gossip. They sat together, hands intertwined, and told their story. How they met through Oliver's adorable proposal, how they fell in love despite their different worlds, how they were building a family one day at a time. The response was mixed. Some people were charmed by their love story, by Oliver's role as matchmaker, by the genuine affection obvious between Mia and Alexander. Others remained skeptical, continued digging, continued looking for scandal. But something had shifted. By refusing to hide, by owning their relationship publicly, they had taken back control. The photographers eventually got bored when Mia and Alexander's outings became predictable. Coffee runs and playground visits weren't exciting content. The think pieces slowed to a trickle, then stopped altogether. Life didn't return to normal exactly. Normal had shifted, evolved into something new. Mia reopened her studio, but now she had security and a manager to handle the curious tourists who wanted to see where the billionaire's girlfriend worked. Her commission list was suddenly full, though she sometimes wondered how many people genuinely liked her art versus wanted to be able to say they owned a Mia Chen original. Alexander's company went public on a bright October morning, and Mia stood beside him on the trading floor, watching the stock price climb higher and higher. Oliver, dressed in a miniature suit that matched his father's, bounced excitedly between them, not quite understanding what was happening, but caught up in the energy anyway. "We did it," Alexander whispered in her ear as bells rang and champagne corks popped around them. "We actually did it." "You did it," Mia corrected, squeezing his hand. "I just painted butterflies and survived the paparazzi." Alexander laughed, that real, unguarded laugh she had grown to love. "You did so much more than that." But even as she smiled and posed for photos and accepted congratulations from strangers, Mia felt something unsettled in her chest. This world of wealth and power and endless possibility, it still didn't quite feel like hers. She was playing dress-up in designer clothes, pretending she belonged at galas and charity functions and board dinners. The breaking point came 2 months later, at a fundraiser for children's literacy. Mia wore a gown that cost more than her first car, her hair professionally styled, makeup applied by someone whose rate was hourly and astronomical. She stood beside Alexander, smiling until her face hurt, making small talk with people whose names she would forget by morning. "So you're an artist," a woman said, her tone suggesting artist was synonymous with unemployed. How quaint. Alexander must love having a little creative project. Mia felt Alexander tense beside her, but she placed a hand on his arm, keeping her smile fixed. "Yes, I paint and sculpt, and occasionally set pretentious people on fire with my mind, but I'm trying to cut back on that last one." The woman's eyes widened, and for a moment Mia thought she had gone too far. Then someone laughed, and suddenly the whole circle was chuckling, and the woman looked properly chastised. "I like her," an older man said to Alexander, raising his glass in Mia's direction. "She's got spine. Don't let this one get away." Later in the car heading home, Alexander was quiet. Mia stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past, exhaustion settling into her bones. "I'm proud of you," Alexander said finally. "The way you handled Margaret tonight. She's been insufferable for years and no one has ever put her in her place like that." "I probably shouldn't have," Mia said. "I keep forgetting I'm supposed to be diplomatic now." "Screw diplomatic," Alexander said firmly. "Be yourself. That's why I fell in love with you. Not some polished fake version. You. Paint-stained and honest and real." Mia turned to look at him, this man who had turned her world upside down in the best and worst ways. "Do you ever regret it? Choosing me? You could have someone who actually fits into your world. Someone who knows how to navigate all of this without constantly putting her foot in her mouth." Alexander reached for her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Never. Not for a second. You're the best thing that's ever happened to Oliver and me. You brought color into our gray world. You made us remember how to live." Pretty words, Mia said softly, but she was smiling. True word, Alexander corrected. Mia, I need to ask you something. He shifted in his seat, and Mia's heart started pounding because she recognized this posture, this particular kind of nervous energy. Not now, she said quickly. Please, not here in the car after a horrible party. If you're going to ask what I think you're going to ask, do it right. Alexander laughed, relaxing slightly. Fair enough, but soon? Soon, Mia agreed, her pulse still racing. 2 weeks later, on a Sunday morning that dawned clear and cold, Alexander took Mia and Oliver to the community garden she had mentioned all those months ago. It was closed for the season, but Alexander had somehow arranged private access. They walked the paths together, Oliver running ahead to examine frost-covered leaves and empty flower beds. There aren't any butterflies, Oliver observed, returning to them with a disappointed expression. They'll be back in the spring, Mia assured him. They're just sleeping right now. Like hibernating? Oliver asked. Exactly like that. They stopped at a small fountain in the center of the garden, dormant now but still beautiful in its winter stillness. Alexander knelt down, and Mia's breath caught because Oliver was kneeling too, both of them looking up at her with matching expressions of hope and love. Miss Mia, Oliver started, his voice serious, remember when I proposed to you, and you said marriage was for grown-ups? Mia nodded, not trusting her voice. Well, I'm still not a grown-up, Oliver continued, but Daddy is, and we both love you very much, and we want you to be part of our family for real, forever. Alexander pulled out a ring, and this time it wasn't candy. It was a simple band of platinum with a single diamond that caught the weak winter sunlight and threw rainbows across the frozen ground. Mia Chen, Alexander said, his voice rough with emotion, you walked into our lives and changed everything. You taught me how to be a better father. You taught Oliver that the world is full of beauty and wonder. You taught us both that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up every day and choosing each other, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Will you marry us? Mia looked at them, father and son, her two favorite people in the entire world. She thought about the young woman who had been painting butterflies in a tiny studio 6 months ago, lonely and struggling and convinced that love like this only existed in stories. She thought about how scared she had been, how many times she had almost walked away, how worth it all those fears had proven to be. Yes, she said, and it came out as a sob. Yes, of course, yes. Alexander stood, sliding the ring onto her finger, and then he was kissing her, while Oliver cheered and danced around them. The three of them stood there in the empty winter garden, holding each other, and Mia felt completely, perfectly happy. The wedding was small, held in late spring in that same garden, now blooming with life and color. Oliver served as best man and ring bearer, taking both jobs with utmost seriousness. Mia's parents cried through the entire ceremony, her mother whispering apologies for ever doubting her daughter's choices. Alexander's business partners and board members sat alongside Mia's artist friends, an unlikely mix that somehow worked. But the best moment came after the ceremony, when Oliver tugged on Mia's dress and asked if he could call her mom now. I'd be honored, Mia said, crouching down to hug him. I'd be so honored, Oliver. Good, he said seriously, because you smell like strawberries and paint, and you have real smiles, and you're the best mom ever. Life after the wedding settled into a new rhythm. Mia kept her studio, kept painting, but now she also had a family to come home to. She painted Oliver's room with a mural of butterflies and flowers, taught him to mix colors and see the world like an artist. Alexander continued running his company, but learned to draw boundaries, to say no, to prioritize the people he loved over endless work. They weren't perfect. They fought about stupid things like whose turn it was to do dishes or whether Oliver could have ice cream before dinner. They struggled with the constant public attention, the photographers who occasionally still appeared, the careful balance of maintaining privacy while living a public life. But they were happy, genuinely, messily, beautifully happy. On their first anniversary, Alexander surprised Mia with a gallery showing of her work. The opening was packed, partly because of her connection to him, but also because her paintings had genuinely captured people's imaginations. Critics who had initially dismissed her as a gold digger were forced to admit she had real talent. a unique vision that translated everyday moments into something magical. "How does it feel?" Alexander asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they stood at the back of the gallery, watching people admire her work. "Terrifying," Mia admitted. "What if they're only here because of you?" "Then they'll stay for your art," Alexander said firmly. "Look at them, Mia. Really look. They're not networking or social climbing. They're actually seeing what you created. They're moved by it." And he was right. Mia watched a woman cry in front of her painting of a child's bedroom, watched a man stare at her portrait of an elderly couple for 10 full minutes, watched Oliver proudly tell anyone who would listen that his mom was the artist. His mom. She still wasn't used to that, probably never would be. The gift of being loved by this serious, wonderful little boy. The evening wound down, and they headed home as a family, Oliver asleep in Alexander's arms, Mia's hand in her husband's. The city glittered around them, full of possibility and promise. And Mia thought about 6-year-old Oliver holding out a ring pop, about how one moment of sweetness had changed everything. "Hey," Alexander said softly, careful not to wake Oliver. "Do you ever regret saying yes to all of this?" Mia looked at him, at the man who had been a stranger and was now her home, at the child who had chosen her before she had been brave enough to choose herself, at the life they had built together against all odds. "Not even a little bit," she said. "Not even once." And in that moment, in the back of a car driving through Manhattan, with her family around her and her dreams finally within reach, Mia Chen knew with absolute certainty that she had found exactly where she belonged. Not in wealth or fame or public approval, but in the quiet, fierce love of people who saw her completely and chose her anyway. The fairy tale, it turned out, wasn't about the billionaire or the dramatic proposal or the happy ending. It was about showing up every day. It was about choosing love even when it was terrifying. It was about a little boy who knew what he wanted and a woman brave enough to take a chance. And they all lived happily, messily, beautifully ever after.